B'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to learn Beitza Daf Zayin. We're going to start 5 lines from the wide lines on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, the Gufa, and we're continuing on a discussion that we had earlier on Daf Amud Beis, and that's the question whether an egg that's still attached to its hen, to the spine or to the combining tissue between the egg and the insides of the hen, at what point does the egg become or receive the status of an egg and not of chicken? The difference being, can you cook it with milk? You're not allowed to cook chicken with milk, but you are allowed to cook an egg with milk. At what point does the egg become an entity of its own and is not considered as part of the chicken? Gufa, Hashechet es hatarnageles. We learned in a brayse, if somebody shechts a hen, umotza bo beitzim gmuris, and he finds fully formed eggs inside them, mutoris leochron becholov. The Tanna Kama say one's allowed to eat those eggs and cook those eggs with milk. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, im hoyu mu'uris begidim. Rabbi Yaakov says if they're still connected they're still attached to the hen with the tissue, then, or to the spine of the hen, then asurais, then they are still considered as part of the chicken. They never received the status of an independent egg, and therefore one's not allowed to eat them with milk. So that's the Machlekes Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yaakov in the Brayse. Asks the Gemara, Man Tana lahad tanu rabbanon. The following opinion, who is it following? That is, we learned ha'oichel min nivlas oif toir, and here we have to introduce a concept which we haven't learned much about, and that is the concept of a nevela, tumas nevela. In this case, we're talking about a nevelas oif tohir. The bird in itself is a tohir species. However, it wasn't shechted, it died. It's a nevela, it's a carcass of an oif, a fowl, which of a tohir species, and we know that the nevela, the carcass of an oif tohir, has tomei. But it's very different to regular tumah. He doesn't make a person tomei by touching it or by moving it, by lifting it. No. You only become tomei by eating it. If you swallow the flesh part of the nevela of the oif tohir, you're not allowed to. It's a nevela. You're not allowed to eat it. But if you eat it, then besides for the issa of eating nevela, then you've also become tomei, and that is the tumah of nevela. But you only become tomei when you swallow part of the flesh of this nevela. The question is, what part of the chicken is considered flesh and what part is not? And that's going to be the discussion here. Ha'oichel min nivlas oif tohir, and he's going to then become tomei. And the halacha is, it's learned from Psukim, but the halacha is that the clothes that he's wearing whilst he's swallowing this nevela of the oif tohir, those clothes become tomei. That's as far as the tumah reaches. Then if he eats min hasholol shel beitzim, a cluster of eggs, and we'll soon see that according to some, these are already formed eggs that are still attached to the hen. Min ha'tzomois, from the bones, umin ha'gidim, the sinews, umin ha'bosor shenitlash min ha'chai, or any part of this carcass, if it was pulled off it whilst it was still alive, and for all intents and purposes it does not have the status of nevela, then tohir. Then the tumah of the nevelas oif tohir does not apply to any of the above. However, if he eats min ha'eshkoil, from the cluster of eggs, which are, we'll have to see what the difference is between sholol shel beitzim and eshkel shel beitzim, but sholol shel beitzim is tohir, and eshkel shel beitzim is in the list of tomei. Min ha'kurkavon, or if he eats from the crop of the bird, or bnei me'ayin, or the intestines, or shehimcha es ha'chelev, or if he melts and liquidizes the fats, v'gomoi, and swallows it. In all those cases, tomei, it is tomei. It's as if he's eaten from the flesh of this bird. So that's what it said. That's what this Tana holds. The question is, man Tana, which Tana holds min hasholol shel beitzim tohir? That the beginning of the Brayse says that amongst the list of things that are not included in the basar, in flesh of the bird, is the sholol shel beitzim. And we now assume that sholol shel beitzim is a fully formed eggs that are still attached to the hen. And we see here that it's not considered part of the flesh of the hen, you see that it's tohir, and we assume that if it's tohir, as in Tumas Nevela, the same will apply to Basar B'cholov, that it's not considered part of the hen, and therefore can be eaten with milk. Omer Rav Yosef says, Deloika Rabbi Yaakov. It's clearly not following the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov, who says that if they're Mu'urais Begidim, then they are Osir. The Ikar Rabbi Yaakov, Ha'omarim Hoyu Mu'urais Begidin, Asurais. So Rav Yosef maintains that according to Rabbi Yaakov, who says that eggs that are still attached to the hen are not allowed to be eaten with milk, we see that according to him, it's considered as part of the hen still, and therefore it would, if eating them should be considered that you're eating part of the hen, part of the nevela, it should make him tomei. And if it doesn't make him tomei, clearly it's not part of the hen. Omar le Abaye. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Mimai, you don't have proof from here that this opinion is not Rabbi Yaakov. Dilma, it could be that Rabbi Yaakov, as well as this Tana, hold that me'ikar adin, the egg, is not part of the chicken, the part of the hen anymore. However, in the halachas of Basar B'cholov, we were machmir. He was more stringent and said that if they're still attached to the hen, then you should act stringently and don't cook it and don't eat it with milk. But as far as Hilchas Tomei is concerned, over there they didn't make a gezerah, they didn't say it was Tomei. Dilma adkan lo kamer of Yaakov Hasam elol inyan isura, maybe only regarding the Issa of Basar B'cholov, there Rabbi Yaakov said that we consider it as part of the hen, don't eat it with milk. Aval inyan tuma loy. But as far as the halachas of tuma are concerned, it could very well be that it's not considered tomei. It's not considered as part of the hen. Are you going to ask me that according to Rabbi Yaakov, in the same way as we're suggesting now, that he was machmir by Basar B'cholov to consider the eggs that are attached to the hen as being part of the hen and don't eat it with milk, why didn't he make a gzeira also that swallowing these eggs should be considered swallowing a nivlas oif toir and have those same halachas? Says the Gemara, that wouldn't be a question. Afushe tuma hu, because then we are increasing the items that are tomei. It means it's whatever's considered the flesh, the basar of the oif, that's the basar. If you're going to add on now also the shalol shel beitzim, which intrinsically is not considered as part of the hen, and you're just adding it on, making it more tomei, we don't want to do that. Since it's only tomei midrabanon, because that's what you're suggesting here. You're suggesting that minatera, really, this shalol shel beitzim is not part of the hen. So if we don't have a very good reason, we don't add on and make more things tomei. When Rashi says the ikka hefsa tyrus, because there's a loss to tyrus, we don't want to reckon things as tomei if we don't really have to, and therefore there's no reason to believe that Rabbi Yaakov couldn't hold that regarding what we learnt here, nivlas eif toher, it could be indeed that shalol shel beitzim will be toher. The ikad amra, a different version, man tana min ha'eshkel shel beitzim tomei. According to this ikad amra, the ikad amra understands that the definition of eshkel shel beitzim is actually these eggs that are attached to the spine of the hen with the sinews. The mu'urais begidin are actually not like we saw in the first version, the shalol shel beitzim, which is tahir, rather the eshkel shel beitzim, which is tomei. And then we asked, who holds that eshkel shel beitzim is tomei? Amar Rav Yosef said, Rabbi Yaakov, it's Rabbi Yaakov, who said him, hoyu mu'urais begidin asurais, that these eggs are not allowed to be eaten with milk. So it seems that he holds that they are part of the hen still, and then we can understand that if one eats them from a carcass, then it's included in the issa or in the tumah of nivlas oif toir. Omele Abaye, and Abaye then said to Rav Yosef, no, mimai de eshkel mehanoch de talyo beeshkel, who told you that eshkel shel beitzim, which is tomei, is talking about the eggs that are being held onto the hen? Dilma, that means not the eshkel. How do you know it's the eshkel itself is actually part of the hen? The eggs, when they're fully formed, are attached to the eshkel. So Abaye is saying, who told you that eshkel, which is tomei, is actually the eggs themselves, and then you have proof that it's Rabbi Yaakov, maybe maybe when it says Eshkel Shel Beitzim, it's referring to the Eshkel itself, which is actually a part of the hen itself. It's part of the spine, or it's attached to the spine. It's not even part. It's not even the egg. Are you going to ask me that Eshkel Gufei Meile Memory? Are you going to ask me that if Eshkel Shel Beitzim actually means the Eshkel itself, the ovary, not the eggs that are coming from it and attached to it, then what's the Chiddush? Of course it's part of the hen. Of course there's going to be Tomei. He says no, because Midi Dehava Akur Kavonu B'nei Me'ayim. Why is the crop and the intestines mentioned? The Afagav de Bosoninu, it's clearly part of the hen. Why do you have to mention it, that it's Tomei? Kiven de Ike Intra de Le'achli. Some people don't eat it, so I may have thought it's not considered as part of the flesh that makes a person Tomei. It's Shechle Shminon, and therefore it had to explicitly say that even though not everybody eats it, nonetheless it's considered part of the flesh of the hen. Hachanami, so to here regarding the eshkel, some don't eat it, so I may have thought that it's not considered part of the hen, and therefore there's no tumah with it. It's Shechle Shminon, that's why we had to be told explicitly that they are tomei. And therefore you don't have any proof that Eshkel Shel Beitzim is actually referring to the eggs, and proof that to Rabbi Yaakov it could be it's talking about the Eshkel, and therefore it's nothing to do with the eggs. Continues the Gemara. Tonu Rabbonon. Kol shetashmishe bayoim, any animal that exclusively mates only in the day, we'll soon see which animal that is, noilad bayoim. Then they hatch, they give birth, so to speak, or they lay their eggs only in the day. Kol shetashmishe balayla, any animal that exclusively mates only at night, noilet balayla, their offspring are born at night. Kol shetashmishe bein bayom bein balayla, any species, which is all the species besides the two mentioned above, that mate either in the day or in the night, noilat bein bayom bein balayla, their offspring are born either in the day or in the night. So that the Bryce explains. Kol shetashmishe bayom noilat bayom ze tarnagoles. A chicken only mates during the day and therefore only lays eggs during the day, not in the night. Kol shetashmishe balaylo noilat balaylo. What's that referring to? Ze atalef. That's the bat. A bat exclusively mates only at night, and the offspring are born only at night. Kol shetashmishe bein bayom ubein balaylo. Anything besides for a chicken and a bat, that where the mating is done either in the day or in the night, it's Odom v'chol v'domile, which is including man and all other animals, then their offspring are born either in the day or in the night. Omar Mar, and now we're going to discuss this price a little bit. Kol shetashmishi bayoim noilad bayim zetarnagoles. We saw that chickens only mate in the day, and therefore they only lay their eggs during the day. L'may nafkamina. What halachic ramification is there to this statement? Look at the Rav Mori Breder of Kahana. The Omer of Mori Breder of Kahana. Bodak bekino shel tarnagolim me'erev Yom Tov. If somebody checked the nest of his chickens just before the onset of Yom Tov, and there were no eggs there at all. The next morning, Hishkim, he got up before Alois HaShachar, very early before it became day, and he finds an egg there. Then Rav Meri says, Rav Meri Breder of Kahana said, Muteris. This egg, we know that it definitely was not laid overnight. It must be that this egg was there from before Yom Tov. Asks the Gemara of Haloi Bodak. He checked the nest, there were no eggs there. Eimeloi Bodak Yofa Yofa. We know that a chicken does not lay eggs during the night, so since it's now before day started, all you've had is the night of Yom Tov, we know on a 100% level that this egg was not laid during the night. It must have been laid the day before, and therefore it's mutter to eat it. It's not considered a beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov. Vafilu bodak yofa. And even if he did check the nest very well, then we'll just assume that yotza ruba. It could be that most of the egg was laid before the onset of Yom Tov, the chozra, and then the egg got swallowed back in to the inside of the hen. The chozra Havoi, and we saw earlier on the Amud, on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, that Rabbi Yechanan holds that once the majority of the egg has been laid, even if it doesn't get finished being laid and it goes back in and only later in the night it comes out, it's considered as if it was laid the day before. And therefore, there's no issue with the fact that we know that chickens don't lay their eggs at night. It's true. A type of egg that has not been laid at all during the day will not be laid at night. This egg was, for all intents and purposes, it was laid in the day. However, since only most of it came out and then it went back in at night, the rest came out, and then the whole egg was laid at night, and therefore he didn't see it. When he was looking before Yom Tov, he didn't see the egg. But nonetheless, when you see it in the morning, we know that that's what must have happened, and therefore it's not considered a Beitza Shenolda b'Yom Tov. Asks the Gemara, Eini, is that true? Rabbi Yosi ben Shaul Omar Rav, Bodak Bekina. Rabbi Yosi ben Shaul said in the name of Rav that if you check the nest, Shel Tarnagoles, me'erev Yom Tov, from Erev Yom Tov, v'lo motza b'beitz, and you don't find any eggs before Yom Tov, u'lemochor hishkim, and in the morning of Yom Tov, before the day starts, before Alois HaShachar, he sees u'motza b'beitza, he finds an egg, then Rav said, Asura, the egg is otter, it's considered a Beitza Shenolda b'Yom Tov. And this just seems to contradict what we just said now. We just said now that the chickens do not lay eggs at night, and since they don't lay eggs at night, this egg must be attributed to a birth, so to speak, to have been laid before Yom Tov. So we have here a contradiction. Answers the Gemara, Hosam midasafna mi'ara. Over there, when Rav said that it was Osa, is talking about when there was no rooster there was no male there, and the hen just warmed itself up to create this egg from rubbing itself on the earth, and therefore that type of an egg that originates in that way without a rooster can be born, can be laid at night. That's what it says. It's only those that mate during the day, those eggs get laid during the day. Here, the hen didn't mate with anyone. It just warmed itself up and created this egg, and therefore it could well have been laid at night. And therefore, if you didn't find any eggs in the nest before Yom Tov, then we assume that this is one of those eggs that are b'desafna me'ara, and therefore it's considered a Beitza Shenolda b'Yom Tov and is asa. Asks the Gemara, Ihachi, if it's true that we assume that a hen could warm itself up and lay an egg at night, then the Rav Meri Nami. Then going back to what Rav Meri said, Bereder of Kahana, why did Rav Meri say that if you check the nest and you don't find any eggs there, and you find an egg there early the next morning, that we assume that it was an egg that was laid the day before and is mutter? Why don't you say maybe it was from Safna Da'ara and it was laid at night and it should be aser? Answers the Gemara, no. Because over there, Rav Meri is talking about a case where we take it for granted that the hen would not warm itself up just by rubbing itself against the earth. Rather, it would definitely only mated with a rooster, and therefore, since it mated with a rooster, the egg would not have been laid at night. Why would we assume that? We're talking about there's a rooster with the hen. There's a rooster with the hen. We assume that they mated. Asks the Gemara, but even if there is a rooster there, how can you be 100% sure that this egg was laid from the rooster, and with the rooster, maybe the hen just warmed itself up on the earth, and it was a safna me'ara, and then this egg could well have been laid at night. How can you, Rav Meri, take it for granted that the egg was, that this hen only mated with the rooster and it was not safna me'ara, and therefore you definitely know that the egg was not laid on the night of Yom Tov? Omer Ravina said, Gemiri, we have a tradition. Kol heichad ikazachar, whenever there's a rooster in the close proximity of a hen, loy safna me'ara, then this hen will not lay an egg without the rooster. Va'ad kamo, how far, what distance between the rooster and the hen can we then take for granted that the hen did not lay the egg other than with the rooster? Amarav, Gamdo Mishmei Rav, Kol Heichad Shama Kolei B'Yamama. As far as the hen could hear the rooster crowing during the day, if it's that clear, that near, that the crowing can be heard, then that's near enough that we assume that the hen would find its way to the rooster, and then they would mate, and the egg would be an egg which is not safna me'ara, and therefore would not have been laid at night. Over Rav Meri Uvda, and indeed there was a story with Rav Meri that somebody came and he said, I checked my nest and there was no eggs there, but the next morning before Alois HaShacha I found an egg there. It's Yom Tov, can I eat it? What's the story? And he said, you can eat it. And even though the closest rooster to this hen was Ad Shitin Bati, it was 60 houses away. And nonetheless, he said that that distance is close enough that we take it for granted that the hen would have mated with the rooster, and therefore the egg would not have been laid at night. If there's a river between the hen and the rooster, loy avra, we don't assume that they crossed the river to mate. V'ika mabra, however, if there's a bridge over the river, avra, then they can pass. V'ika meitzra, but if there's a very flimsy type of rope bridge, loy avra, we assume that the chicken will not go over it. Hava uvda v'avra metzra, but the Gemara says that there was an incident where the hen did go over, or the rooster, they did cross this mitzvah, this very flimsy type of rope bridge, and even though it was a mitzvah, they did pass over it. So continues the Gemara. B'mai oikimna b'desafna me'ara. So what did we just explain? We explained that the case where we saw that Rabbi Yossi ben Shaul Omar Rav, that said that even though you checked the nest and there was no egg there before, and you found an egg in the morning, we do assume that the egg was laid overnight and is also. What did we say? We explained with the safna me'ara. We're talking about that it must be there was no rooster in sight, and therefore this hen just warmed itself up from the earth, and such a type of an egg could be laid at night, and then it's a beitza shenilda b'yom tov and is also. So if so, my area bodak, kiloi bodak nami. I don't understand. So why are you talking about a case that you checked the nest the night before and there were no eggs there? And what happens if you didn't check the nest the night before? If there's no rooster around, then we assume that it's safna me'ara, and if it's safna me'ara, it could have been laid at night. So it would be asa, even if you didn't check the day before. If you find an egg in the nest on Yom Tov morning, it's asa, beitza shenilda b'yom tov. It may have been laid on Yom Tov, and therefore it should be asa. Why do we only assume that it was laid at night? Because you checked before the night, and there was nothing there in the nest. Says the Gemara, Kiloi bodak, because if he didn't check the nest before, Eimod, we assume me'etmei lavoi. We'd rather take on, it's more probable that this egg was laid the day before, rather than saying that it was laid at night. Says if it's more probable that a hen will lay its egg, even if it's misafna da'ara, that it's more probable that it was laid in the day than at night, then even when you checked the nest and there was nothing in it before Yom Tov set in, and you found it overnight, and in the morning you saw this egg, why do you assume it was laid overnight? Why don't you assume it was laid the day before, and just the majority came out, and then it went back into the hen, and that's why you didn't find it, and then it came out overnight, but it's considered as if it was laid in the day, or Rabbi Yechanan, like we saw, according to Rabbi Yechanan, that's considered laying an egg. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yechanan lo yishchiach. It's not probable, it's very not common, this thing of an egg being laid, mostly laid, and then going back into the hen and coming out later on. So if we know that there was a rooster there, and we assume that it mated with a rooster, and we know that it didn't lay an egg during the night, then we say that's what probably happened. It was probably laid the day before, and it came out, the majority of it, and then it went back in, like Rabbi Yechanan. That's only because we have no choice. But if we do have a choice, for example, we didn't check the nest beforehand. If you don't check the nest beforehand, then we assume that it was laid the day before. But if you check the nest and there was nothing there beforehand, and there's no rooster there, therefore it could be that it was laid because it's an egg which is b'desafna me'ara, then we assume it's b'desafna me'ara, and therefore it was laid in the night, and therefore it's also, it's considered a Beitza Shenel B'Yom Tov. Continues the Gemara, another halacha from the same source as we saw before, Omer Rabbi Yosi ben Shaul Omer Rav, another non-related halacha from Rabbi Yosi ben Shaul in the name of Rav, Hai Tumo Shchika, if you have garlic that was ground and almost liquidized, and Sakanta Legluya, if it was left open, and there's a possibility that a snake, because it's been exposed, a snake would have come to take from it, and then some of its poison would have gone into the garlic, and therefore if it's left exposed, don't eat it, it's dangerous. Continues the Gemara, and the Gemara is now taking us back to the Mishnah that we learnt, and Daf Yomi Shiur. We saw in the Mishnah a second machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. The first one was Beitza Shenel B'Yom Tov. The second one was as follows: Beis Shammai Omrim Sa'ir b'Kazayis v'Chometz b'Kukuseves. That on Pesach you're not allowed to eat chometz, or you're not allowed to eat own. We're going to discuss that now in the Gemara. But the measure of sa'ir, which is a much stronger type of leaven, is something that makes other doughs ferment and leaven. Then sa'ir, the measure is a kazayis. But chometz, which is a much weaker type of leaven, there b'Kukuseves, you're only going to be chayav if you eat the size of a date, which is larger than the size of an olive. That's Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel Omrim Zeh v'Zeh b'Kazayis. Beis Hillel are more stringent and say that even chometz, the measure is kazayis, not koiseves. Says the Gemara, Mai tamayu de Beis Shammai. What would be the source of Beis Shammai to differentiate between sa'ir and chometz? Says the Gemara, because im kein nichtei brachmana chometz v'lo yiboyes sa'ir. Why does the Torah specifically speak about sa'ir and speak about chometz independently? Just speak about chometz, and we'll take it for granted that sa'ir is included, is not going to be any less stringent than chometz. And we'll take it for granted that umah chometz she'en chimutzei kosher. If chometz, who the properties of chimutz, of leavening, of fermenting, are not so strong, is bekazayis, the measures of kazayis, sa'ir b'chimutzei shechimutzei kosher lekolshkin. Then sa'ir, which is even a stronger type of chometz, then of course it will also be bekazayis. Sa'ir the kosav rachmon lomoli. Why does the Torah single out sa'ir besides having mentioned chometz? It must be loy melachot to teach you that shiurei shel zeh loika shiurei shel zeh. It must be to teach you they have a different measure. And so the minimum measure is a kazayis, so we say that the sa'ir, which is the more stringent type of chometz, has a smaller measure, which is the one of a kazayis. Chometz, which is a weaker type of chometz, must have a larger measure. What's the larger measure? Koseves. And in Hilchos Yom Kippur we already find that the size of a date has significance regarding eating an Yom Kippur, and therefore Beis Shammai maintains that the measure of chometz you need is koseves, not a kazayis. Or Beis Hillel say no. Beis Hillel will say tzrichi. I need to say chometz and I need to say sa'ir, and it's not in order just to impress on us that they have a different measure to be chayav. No. Because if the Torah would only say sa'ir, I may have thought that sa'ir is chayav because it's a very strong type of chometz. Aval chometz, but regular chometz, to ein chimutzei kasha, I may have thought he's not chayav at all. Tzricha, that's why he needs to mention chometz. And if it would mention chometz, I may have thought mishum deroi lachila. Chometz in and of its own is edible. Sa'ir is not edible. It's an agent it's like yeast. It can make a dough ferment and rise, but in and of its own it cannot be eaten. I may have thought I may have thought there's no issa at all. Tzricha, that's why I need to mention both of them. So I need to mention chometz, I need to mention sa'ir, but not to impress on us that they have a different measure. Asks the Gemara, Beis Shammai les lehu de Reb Zera? Does Beis Shammai not agree with what Reb Zera understood from explicit psukim? Reb Zera says that Posach HaKosov, the Posuk starts Shivas Yomim Sa'ir lo yimotzi b'voteichem ki chol oichel machmetzes v'nichrasa ha'nefesh ha'im edas Yisrael kagir b'geru be'ezach haaretz. The Posuk starts off speaking about Sa'ir, Shivas Yomim Sa'ir lo yimotzi b'voteichem, and continues ki kol oichel machmetzes, talks about chometz. Posach HaKosov v'Sa'ir v'siyim b'chometz, it finishes with chometz. Lo yimar loch to teach us Zeu sa'ir, zeu chometz. That chometz and sa'ir are the same. They have the same measure. Beis Shammai doesn't agree with that. Says the Gemara, Le'inyan achila kule alma lo pligi. you're right. Regarding eating chometz, everybody agrees, even Beis Shammai agree, that there's no machlokes and the measure is a kazayis. Ki pligi, what are they arguing about? L'inyan biur. Only regarding the chiyuv to destroy and to get rid of the chometz from your home, the chiyuv of biur, of baliroi, balimotze, you shouldn't see, you shouldn't own any chometz. Beis Shammai Savra, Beis Shammai say, lo yalfinon biur me'achila, we don't learn biur from achila, that in the same way as achila, it's the same measure, so'ir and chometz, that it's a kazayis. No, they don't learn biur from achila, and therefore they say that the chiyuv to be mavayr, to get rid of so'ir, is a kazayis. Getting rid of chometz is only from the size of a koseves. Or Beis Hillel savri alfinon biur me'achila, and Beis Hillel say we learn biur from achila the same way as achila, even chometz, the measure is a kazayis. So to biur, the measure is a kazayis. Itmar nami omer b'yesi bar chanina machlokes l'inyan biur. The machlokes in the Mishnah is only regarding when one has to get rid of it. Aval inyan achila divrei hakel zeh v'zeh b'kazayis. Tani nami hachi, we also saw in a brayso. V'lo yiroi lecha. This is a psukim that says matzos ya'ochel es shivas hayomim v'lo yiroi lecha chometz v'lo yiroi lecha so'ir b'chol gvulecha. So there we're talking about the lo yiroi lecha chometz and the lo yiroi lecha so'ir. Zeu machlokes shabim Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. The brayso says that regarding bal yiroi, not seeing and owning chometz, that's where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing as to how much chometz till you're required to get rid of it. So Beis Shammai omrim so'ir b'kazayis v'chometz b'kakoseves, or Beis Hillel omrim zeh v'zeh b'kazayis. So you see clearly that the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is not regarding the measure that you're chayav for eating it, rather the measure that you have to get rid of on Pesach. Continues the Gemara, Hashechet chayav v'oif b'yom tov, and this takes us to the third machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in our Mishnah. And it goes as follows: Hashechet chayav oif, if somebody shechts a wild animal or fowl, any type of bird, b'yom tov, not a behema, we know that whenever one shechts a chayav oif, there's a chiyuv, a mitzvah of kisui hadam, of covering the blood with earth. So if somebody, and on Yom Tov, if somebody is shechting a chayav oif on Yom Tov, Beis Shammai omrim yachper, Beis Shammai says you can dig bedeker with a spade, v'yichaseh, dig up some earth even on Yom Tov. Why? It seems that Beis Shammai holds that the mitzvah saseh of kisei adam overrides the lo saseh of not digging on Yom Tov. Or Beis Hillel say no, lo yishchot elem ken hayoloi offer muchan mi'ba'id yom. You're only allowed to shecht if you have prepared beforehand the earth from before Yom Tov, because you're not allowed to dig up on Yom Tov. Or Moedim and Beis Hillel agree she'im shachat, that if you did shecht on Yom Tov, and now you need to do kisui adam, sheyachper bedeker v'yichaseh, then assuming that you have a spade already in the ground, then you can use the earth, you can pull out the earth and cover the blood with it. And we'll see how this works in the Gemara. And the last four words of the Mishnah we're going to see in the next Shiur on Daf Ches. Says the Gemara, Hashechet chayav oif b'yom tov v'chulu. The Gemara says that the word hashechet normally means if he shechted, which means b'di'evet, in lekatchila loy. So it's as if we read in the Mishnah that everybody agrees you shouldn't shecht if you don't have earth ready from before Yom Tov. Hashechet, if you shechted chayav oif on Yom Tov, then Beis Shammai say you can dig up the earth, and Beis Hillel say that lo yishchet elim ken hoya offer muchan. We're going to have to understand that. The Gemara says hashechet di'evet in lekatchila loy. The word hashechet means that you shouldn't do it lekatchila. If you did it b'di'evet, you can dig up the earth, according to Beis Shammai. If we're right in our reading, let's move to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel oimrim lo yishchet. You shouldn't shecht, but they say if you shecht, you shouldn't shecht lekatchila unless you have earth from before Yom Tov. And what does that mean? You shouldn't shecht lekatchila. That's what the word lo yishchet means. And it would seem from there that Beis Hillel say you shouldn't shecht lekatchila, and Beis Shammai say would hold you can shecht lekatchila. Michlal the Tanakam Sova Yishchet, you can shecht lekatchila, and that's contrary to what the word hashechet of the Tanakam of Beis Shammai. That means we have a seeming contradiction. The word hashechet of Beis Shammai seems to be that only b'di'eved you're allowed to shecht, and Beis Hillel seems to say lo yishchet, which seems to say that lekatchila you shouldn't shecht. Well, that's exactly the same. That means they both hold that l'katchila you shouldn't shecht. So what are they arguing about? Says the Gemara, Hol loy kasha. We can answer that. That when it says in Beis Hillel, when Beis Hillel said that lo yishchot, that l'katchila you shouldn't shecht, they meant as follows: lo yishchot v'yechase. That regarding the actual shlita, that's not what Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing about. Indeed, both of them agree that you shouldn't shecht l'katchila. So what they're arguing about? They're arguing about if you shechted b'di'eved, are you allowed to complete the shlita, namely do the kisei adam, or not? So Beis Shammai say that the lo yishchot v'yechase ka'omar. Beis Shammai say hasheichet, if b'di'eved you shechted, you're allowed to now l'katchila dig up the earth and cover it. And Beis Hillel say lo yishchot v'yechase, if you shechted and you didn't have earth available, you shouldn't do kisei adam. You're not allowed to do kisei adam. You're not allowed to undig the earth. If that's the correct understanding of the Machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, let's keep moving on. It's not going to read. Ema Seifa, let's move further down. What does it say? Umoidim, that everybody agrees. That means Beis Hillel agrees to Beis Shammai. She'im shachat, that if you shechted, she'yachber b'deker v'yechase, that you can dig up with a spade and you can cover the blood. So you see that everybody agrees if you shechted that you're allowed to cover the blood, even if you didn't have blood, the earth ready before. So it must be, if that's not where the machlekes is, it must be the machlekes is whether you're allowed to do the shchita. Michlal doreisha lav di'evedu. It must be that the first part of the Mishnah, where there's a machlekes, is not discussing whether b'di'eved, if you shechted, can you do kisei adam, because that's what the last clause of the Mishnah is saying, that even Beis Hillel agree that if you shechted, you're allowed to do the kisei adam, even if you didn't have the earth from before Yom Tov. So it must be the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about, are you allowed to shecht l'katchila or not, even though you don't have this the earth to cover it with. And then we have a seeming contradiction. If Beis Hillel say, don't shecht l'katchila, and if you shechted, you can cover it, as we saw in the Hemshech of Beis Hillel, then according to Beis Shammai, l'katchila you're allowed to shecht it. If l'katchila you're allowed to shecht it, well, how do you understand the word hasheichet? Hasheichet normally means that b'di'eved, if you shechted, then the halach is, whatever the halach is, that you're allowed to cover it. The term hasheichet seems to be if you shechted, not you can shecht. It doesn't say sheichatin, shecht. If you shechted, it's b'di'eved. And it's not b'di'eved, because we said only according to Beis Hillel it's b'di'eved. Omar Rabba, so Rabba answers, Hochik Omar. The word hasheichet doesn't mean, as it often does, a loshon of b'di'eved, if he shechted. No. It actually means a loshon of l'katchila. Hasheichet doesn't mean if he shechted, it means if somebody wants to come to shecht. Hasheichet shebo limlech, he comes to inquire, he comes to ask a question. Keitzad oimrim loy. If somebody comes and asks, can I shecht on Yom Tov, Echaya or Oif, what do we tell him? So, Beis Shammai oimrim, according to Beis Shammai oimer loy, we tell him, shchait, no problem, shecht, and then, that's one is shecht, two, chafir, and then dig up the earth, and then three, v'chisei, and cover the blood with the earth that you've dug up. That's Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel oimrim, Beis Hillel say, what will we tell this person? Lo yishchot elim ken hoyle of hamuchen miboyim. Only shecht if you had earth prepared from beforehand to do kisei adam with. That was Rabba's version. Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef, in a very similar theme, explains the Mishnah. However, he says it a little bit the different order. Rabbi Yosef Omar Hochak Omar Hasheichet Shebali Molech Hasheichet. Somebody who wants to shecht and he comes to ask, should he shecht? Keitzad Omer Loi. What do we tell him? Beis Shammai Imrim. Beis Shammai say Omer Loi. He says as follows: Leich Chafoyer. First dig up the earth for Kisei Adam, and only then two shchoit shecht, and three v'chisei and cover. So Rav Yosef has said the same as Rabba. All he's done is he said do the chafira, the digging, before the shlita, whereas Rabba said do the shlita before the digging. And Beis Hillel they say that you should only shecht if you had the earth prepared from Erev Yom Tov. So that means there's machlekes Rabba and Rav Yosef in the opinion of Beis Shammai, whether you dig before you shecht or you shecht before you dig. Omele Abaye le Rav Yosef. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Lema, can it be assumed that that you, my master of Yosef, V'Rabba and Rabba, what are you arguing about, whether you shecht, whether you do the chafira before the shchita or after? But Reb Zera Marav komiflugit. You're arguing regarding halacha of Reb Zera in the name of Rav. The Omer Reb Zera Marav, Hashoichi tzorich sheitein ofor lemata v'ofor lemala. Rav says, according to Reb Zera, that Kisei Adam doesn't only mean covering the blood on top of the blood, but even under the blood there should be some earth. The blood should drop onto the earth. Shenemer, as it says in the pasuk, "V'ish ish mibnei Yisrael u'minagir agor b'seicham asher yotzu tzeid chaya oif asher yochil v'shofach es domoy v'chisehu be'ofer." What does it mean be'ofer? It doesn't say v'chisehu ofer, cover it with earth. It says in earth. What does it mean to cover it in the earth? It seems to be that there should be earth underneath it as well as earth on top of it. Ofer lo nemar ela be'ofer. Melamed she'asheich tzarich shitin ofer lemata v'ofer lemala. To teach us that the person who's shechting, or the person who's doing the Kisei Adam, has to put earth underneath as well as on top. So Damar, you Rav Yosef, who you maintained that you should first dig up the earth and then do shchita, Islay Reb Zera, you hold of what Reb Zera said. You need earth underneath the blood, so you obviously have to have the earth before you do the shchita. Rabbi Lesley Reb Zera, and Rabbi doesn't hold the Reb Zera. Rabbi says you don't need any earth underneath the blood, only on top. So first do the shchita, let the blood flow onto the floor, and then you'll put the earth on top of it. Omale. So Rav Yosef answered back to Abaya, no, Bein lididi ubein l'Rabba islon de Reb Zera. We both agree to what Reb Zera said, that Kisei Adam means you have to have earth underneath and earth on top. And this is what we're arguing about. Rabbi says, Ikar ofer lemata. If you already have earth for underneath the blood, there, and you don't yet have earth for on top of the blood, so Rabbi says, Ikar ofer lemata. If you already have earth for underneath, then you can shecht, and then you can dig up the earth to put on top. But if you don't have earth to put already from before Yom Tov, you don't have earth for under the blood, then we don't let you shecht bichlal, because we do not let you dig up the earth for the earth underneath the blood, only for the earth on top of the blood. We'll soon see why. Because maybe you're going to dig up the earth because you need earth for underneath the blood. So before you do the shchita, you'll dig up the earth, and then you'll change your mind. You won't do the shchita. Then it will transpire that you dug up the earth without doing a shchita, and that's not allowed. But I, says Rav Yosef, ha'adifa, adarabba ha'adifa. We prefer that you dig up the earth in order to be able to put it underneath the blood, and then you do the shchita. Like he says, first do chafira, then the shchita, and then you put the rest of the earth on top of the blood. Because if you're not going to allow him to do the shchita in the absence of earth that was pre-prepared from Erev Yom Tov for underneath the blood, he's going to refrain from Simchas Yom Tov. He's not going to be able to shecht. We want him to be able to shecht. And therefore, we're not concerned that he's going to change his mind. And that's what Rav Yosef says. And we let him dig up the earth for underneath the Kisei Adam, and then he can do the shchita, and then cover over the blood, and enjoy his Yom Tov meal. Continues the Gemara. Beis Hillel agrees to Beis Shammai that if you did do the shchita, you shouldn't have done the shchita if you didn't have earth prepared before, according to Beis Hillel. But if you did do the shchita, he agrees that you can dig up, you can use a spade and dig up the earth to do Kisei Adam. Omer Zrika Omer Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said something very interesting, and Tosfos on Daf Tes says that he's saying this also in Beis Shammai, also in Beis Hillel. There's no difference in this aspect. That Beis Shammai lekatchila and Beis Hillel b'di'eved is only talking about when the spade was already in the ground from before Yom Tov. That means, and therefore he's not doing any chafira. He's not doing any digging. There's other issues we're soon going to see, another few issues we have to deal with. But the digging, he's not doing any digging. It's already considered as being dug out. And Rashi explains that it seems here, that, and it's evident from what Rav Yehuda is saying, that the reason that you're allowed to do the Kisei Adam is not because the mitzvah saseh of Kisei Adam overrides the lo saseh of doing melachos and Yom Tov. No, we have to assume that the melachos of Yom Tov, we're not overriding the melachos of Yom Tov. How are we not overriding it? Because it's already chofor, it's already been dug from before, and the only issue is, we'll soon see, there's issues of, number one, what you're going to do with the earth. If it's lumps of earth, you can't do Kisei Adam. You have to crush them up, and crushing is a tailed of teichen, of grinding. We have to get around that. There's an issue of building. You're making a hole. Are you allowed to build? So that's what the Gemara is going to address now. But it must be that we're not transgressing any serious melachas to be able to do the Kisei Adam. Asks the Gemara, okay, you Rav Yehuda say that it's already considered as dug. The spade was already dug in before. Fine. Ovid ksisha, you have to crush the earth, the lumps, to make them able to be covered, to cover the blood with it. And that is similar to grinding. You're not allowed to do that. It's talking about loose earth, where you don't need to crush it up, it's already loose. You're making a hole. If you're making a hole that is to do with the malach of boine. You're not allowed to build. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Abba, the Omer Rabbi Abba, Chayfer Guma b'Shabbos, ve'enei tzarich elo le'afra, potor aleo. Rabbi Abba says that you're only chayev when you dig if you actually want the hole. Here, I don't want the hole, I want the earth. So since all I want is the earth, I don't want the hole, you're not chayev for making the hole. So it's not considered binyan, it wasn't my intention. And therefore you're potter, and therefore for the sake of the Suda of Yom Tov, we allow a person, as long as he's not doing any of the serious malachas, then we allow him, b'di'evet, according to Beis Hillel, the Katchil, according to Beis Shammai, to dig up the earth, assuming that the spade was already in the ground, says Rav Yehuda. We pull up the earth, and we do Kisui Hadam. And in Mirz Hashem, in the next shiur, we're going to continue from here.